Episode 1: The Whisper Beneath the Stone. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. The cemetery had been closed for decades, its gates rusted shut, its graves half swallowed by weeds and time. But something, call it temptation, call it damnation, pulled me through a gap in the fence, under a sky where the moon bled through black clouds like a wound refusing to close. At first, it was only silence, that heavy, suffocating silence that makes your own breath sound sinful. I walked between crooked crosses and broken angels, their stone wings chipped, their faces erased by rain. I told myself I was trespassing against memory, against God, but not against the living, until I heard it. My name, whispered, not shouted, not imagined, but spoken clearly, as if someone had bent their lips close to my ear. I froze, my throat locked. And then again, softer, slower. David! My blood iced. No one should have known my name there. No one should have been there at all. But the sound didn't come from around me. It came from beneath me, from the earth. I stumbled back, my lantern trembling in my hand, its flame throwing wild shadows across the gravestones. That's when I saw it. A tomb, more intact than the rest, its marble lid sealed but smeared with rain-dark moss. No inscription but one, carved in letters so faint I almost missed them. David H. Marino. My name, my full name. I fell to my knees, choking on air that suddenly smelled of wet soil and iron. I thought I was dreaming, or worse, blaspheming just by seeing it. The voice came again, now layered, as if more than one throat spoke it. Some low, some high, some broken, some holy. David, you came back. My lantern cracked in my grip, the glass splitting. The flame hissed but refused to die, burning brighter, as though feeding on the voice itself. I wanted to run. Every bone in my body screamed at me to run, but my knees locked, pressed to the earth as if I were kneeling before an altar. I prayed, not to be brave, not to understand, but to be unseen. My words stumbled out, desperate, like a thief caught inside the sanctuary. Yet even as I begged, the tomb responded, "Prayers cannot hide you. We already know your soul." The ground trembled faintly, not enough to shake the world, but enough that the crucifix around my neck tapped against my chest in rhythm with the whisper. It felt less like an echo and more like a pulse, beating from inside the stone. I staggered to my feet and fled, crashing through weeds and thorns, tearing my hands open on broken iron. Behind me, the whisper didn't fade. It followed. It crawled up my spine and clung to my ears until I burst back onto the street. Even now, as I speak these words, I feel it hasn't left. That night wasn't an accident. The tomb called me by name because it was waiting, and I fear it still is. Episode 2: The Name That Shouldn't Be Spoken. The morning after, I sat in the back pew of the village church, staring at the crucifix above the altar. Its face seemed different now, sharper, almost accusing. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whisper again, curling around my skull like smoke that never thins. I needed to tell someone. I needed a priest. Father Samuel had been in this church for as long as I could remember. His hair was silver, his eyes steady, his sermons always heavy with warnings about sin. But when I told him what I had heard, the whisper, the tomb, my name carved into stone, he didn't interrupt, didn't even cross himself. He only leaned forward, his lips tightening as if each word I spoke was salt rubbed into an old wound. When I finished, silence fell. For a moment I thought he might laugh, dismiss me as a fool wandering where I shouldn't. Instead, he whispered back, "Do not speak the name again." I frowned, "But Father, it was mine. It is mine." His hand shot up, trembling but commanding. "No." His voice cracked like old wood. "That name is a doorway. To repeat it aloud is to invite it open." I stared at him, my chest tight. "But the tomb, why would it bear my name?" He looked away, to the stained glass window where sunlight fractured into blood-red beams. "Because names are not owned only by the living. They belong to history, to spirits, to God, and to whatever stands against him." I pressed him, desperate. "You know something. You've seen it, haven't you?" The priest's face paled. His eyes flicked toward the confessional, as if someone waited inside. Then he spoke a phrase that rattled me more than the whisper itself. "Your name was written there before you were born." I felt the air leave me, a hollow widening in my chest. He refused to explain further. only pushed a rosary into my hand so tight the beads cut into my skin. "Pray," he demanded. "Pray," and never set foot near that grave again. But that night, as the church bells tolled for evening prayer, I made a mistake. Alone in my room, staring at the cracked mirror, I mouthed the name. Quiet, careful, as if saying it to my reflection made it safer. The whisper answered instantly. It slithered from the corners of the room, from the cracks in the wood, from the hollow between my ribs. My reflection's lips kept moving even when mine stopped, forming syllables I didn't dare hear. My lantern flared like before, shadows bending backward against the wall. And then, 3 knocks, soft, deliberate, on my window. I froze. The window looked out onto nothing but the churchyard. When I gathered the courage to look, there was no one. Only the glass fogged with breath, spelling out a word. David. The priest had begged me not to speak it, and yet in my arrogance I had awakened it again. And now it knew I had listened. Episode 3. The Midnight Bell. I thought I could endure it. The whisper, the breath on my window, the name that no longer belonged only to me. I clutched the rosary Father Samuel had given me until the beads bruised my fingers, until the metal cross burned warm from my sweating palm. But faith can be thin when night thickens. It happened 3 nights later. The church stood in the center of the village, its bell tower long since silenced. Rust had locked the gears, and no hand had rung it in years. Yet at the stroke of midnight, as I lay awake, the bell thundered across the valley. Not once, not twice, 13 times. The sound was wrong, too heavy, too alive. It rattled my bones like a command. I staggered outside, barefoot on the cobblestones, pulled by a dread that felt almost like obedience. Others opened their shutters, confused, but no one else stepped out. Only me. Only the one the tomb had called. The church doors stood wide open, though I knew Father Samuel always barred them at night. Candlelight flickered within, but not the warm kind. These flames bent inward toward the altar, as though something unseen drank from their glow. Then I heard it, the whisper. Only it wasn't soft anymore. It rode inside the bell's echo, layered 100 voices deep, shaping my name until it trembled in the air like a hymn turned inside out. David! My feet carried me down the aisle without my will. Pews loomed like crooked teeth. The crucifix above the altar seemed to writhe in the light. Christ's face half turned as if refusing to look at me. At the center of the altar lay a book, not the Bible. I knew that weight, that binding. This was older, darker. Its cover was cracked leather, scorched at the edges, and across its spine, in letters burned deep, was my name again. The bell stopped, silence crushed in, and then stone grinding on stone. The floor beneath the altar cracked, splitting open to reveal a passage downward. Cold air gushed out, thick with rot and incense, a smell both sacred and spoiled. My rosary snapped in my hand, beads scattering across the floor like spilled teeth. I should have fled. I should have screamed. Instead, I leaned forward, hearing it clearer now, rising from below. David, descend. I backed away, trembling, when another sound pierced the church, a shout, harsh and desperate. Close your ears! Father Samuel stumbled through the doors, his cassock loose, his face ashen with terror. He hurled holy water across the altar, the droplets sizzling like acid where they landed. The ground shook violently, and the whisper twisted into a howl, as if the very tomb beneath had been denied its prize. The priest grabbed me, dragging me from the sanctuary. Behind us, the church doors slammed shut on their own, sealing the darkness in. But the bell tolled one last time, though no rope had swung it, no hand had touched it. A single, heavy note that followed us out into the night. And in its echo the voice returned, softer now but undeniable. You will come back. You are already ours. Episode 4. The Confession. No priest accepted. I couldn't carry it any longer. The bell, the whisper, the altar splitting open. I felt the weight of damnation pressing down on me like a hand on the back of my neck. My chest ached with words unsaid, sins I hadn't even committed but somehow was already guilty of. And so, I did what any soul drowning in fear would do. I went to confession. The church smelled of smoke and old incense that day, as though the walls themselves had been burned but never rebuilt. The confessional waited in the corner, a dark wooden box carved with crosses that no longer felt holy, but like nails hammered into a coffin. I stepped inside, closed the door, and the world became narrow. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," I whispered, voice trembling. The grill slid open. For a moment I saw only shadow behind it, then the faint outline of a man's jaw. "Speak, child." The words were calm, steady, but something about them pulled at me like a hook. I poured everything out. The cemetery, the tomb carved with my name, the whisper that knew me better than my own thoughts, the bell, the book, the passage beneath the altar. I confessed not only what I had seen, but what I had feared, that I wanted to know the truth, even if it meant touching the darkness. Silence followed, heavy, unbearable silence. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "You are not the first to kneel here with that name." My blood ran cold. I pressed closer to the grill. "What do you mean?" But the priest on the other side did not answer me. Instead, he began to mutter prayers, not for me, but against me. Latin phrases of banishment, exorcism, as though I had already been judged. My chest tightened. My skin burned where the words landed, invisible flames licking through the holes in the screen. I shouted, begged, told him I only wanted forgiveness. But when the muttering stopped, it wasn't him who answered. It was the whisper from inside the confessional. "We have confessed already, through you." The shadow behind the grill shifted. I pressed my hands against the wood, desperate to hold on to something real, and the door swung open. The booth was empty. No priest, only the rosary beads scattered on the seat, the same kind that had snapped in my hands that night at the altar. I stumbled out, gasping, into the center aisle. Father Samuel rushed toward me from the sacristy, horror etched across his face. "You went in there?" I confessed, I stammered. "But he wasn't." "There was no priest," he hissed, gripping my shoulders. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "That confessional has been locked for 20 years. I turned, staring at the booth. Its door hung open like a mouth that had just spoken my name. And in that silence I understood. My confession hadn't been heard by a servant of God. It had been taken by the tomb itself. Episode 5. The tomb opens by itself. I avoided the cemetery for as long as I could. But temptation and terror are siblings. They pull you back even when you swear you'll never return. Father Samuel's warnings echoed in me like sermons carved into stone, yet the whispers were louder. They filled my sleep, bleeding through my dreams until every night was a vigil I could not escape. And then came the storm. It tore through the village with a rage that felt biblical. Lightning shattering trees, thunder grinding the sky into pieces. My window rattled until the glass nearly split, and over it all, beneath the roar of the heavens, I heard it again. My name. I told myself I wouldn't follow it, but my feet moved anyway, dragging me through rain and mud, down the path that curved to the graveyard. The gates, once sealed by rust, now stood wide open as if someone had been expecting me. The cemetery writhed with shadows. Crosses bent under the weight of the storm. Angels leaned forward, their stone eyes filled with water that looked like tears. I pushed through the wild grass until I found it. The tomb. The stone lid, once sealed, once unbreakable, was moving. Not by hands, not by tools, by itself. Grinding, shifting, cracking open under the force of nothing visible. I should have run, but I stood rooted. Rain pelting my skin, lightning carving my shadow across the marble. With a deafening groan, the lid slid aside. The tomb opened. I staggered closer, lantern shaking in my grip, though the storm should have killed its flame. Inside, I expected to see bones, dust, the silence of the dead. But there was nothing. Nothing except a strip of flesh. It was no larger than a handkerchief, pale and stiff, etched with letters. I leaned in, my breath catching as I read them. David H. Marino. My name again, carved into skin as though the body itself had become scripture. The whisper rose around me, not from within the earth now, but from the tomb itself, echoing against the rain. You were written long before you were born. You are the continuation. The strip of flesh trembled as if alive, and before I could step back it began to curl, folding upon itself like a tongue preparing to speak. I dropped the lantern. Its flame hissed out in the rain. In the darkness, the whisper became a chorus, filling the cemetery, spilling into the storm. Each voice calling me like a hymn gone rotten. I tried to run, but my legs dragged as though the earth wanted me buried. My heart pounded against my ribs, beating in time with the thunder. And still the tomb spoke, relentless. Enter, become, fulfill. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the stone for one final second. And I saw, etched deep inside the marble, as if waiting all along, an empty space shaped perfectly like a body, my body. I turned and fled, slipping through mud, clawing my way back to the gates. But even as I escaped, I knew the truth. The tomb had opened, not to release something, but to make room for Episode 6, The Choir Without Voices. After that storm, the village never sounded the same. The rain stopped, but silence lingered, thick and unnatural. As if the storm had taken more than trees and rooftops. It had stolen the air itself. And then came Sunday. I went to Mass because fear had driven me there. Where else could I hide but in the house of God? Yet even before I entered, I knew something was wrong. The doors of the church yawned open, though no one held them. Inside, candles flickered, though no one had lit them. And the pews, full. The villagers sat stiff, pale, as though carved from wood. Eyes forward, hands pressed together in false prayer. And the choir stood in their robes by the altar, mouths open, but no sound came. Not a single note. Their jaws moved, their throats strained, but silence reigned. Yet the hymn still filled the church, not with their voices, with something else. It was the whisper again. My name, woven into the melody like a hidden verse. 100 tones, some broken, some angelic, some barely human, layering together into a song meant only for me. David! I clutched the pew before me, nails digging into the wood. No one else reacted. Not Father Samuel, who lifted his hands as if conducting the silence. Not the villagers, whose lips mouthed prayers they couldn't hear. It was as though I alone bore witness to the truth. The choir had been replaced by the tomb. The hymn swelled, rising toward the ceiling, shaking the stained glass until shards of red light bled onto the floor. I stumbled into the aisle, desperate to silence it. My footsteps echoed louder than the voices, until the choir's eyes, all at once, shifted to me. Not their bodies, only their eyes. Every head still faced the altar, but their eyes rolled sideways, unblinking, pinning me where I stood. I couldn't breathe. My name drummed against the walls, carved into the hymn, repeated until I thought it might burst my skull. Father Samuel shouted, his voice cracking the air. Enough! The hymn collapsed, cut short like a candle pinched out. Silence returned, heavier than before. The villagers bowed their heads again. The choir stilled, and for a moment I believed it was over. But Father Samuel did not look at me with relief. He looked at me with horror. You cannot stay here, he whispered, trembling. This place no longer belongs to him. He dragged me outside, the church doors slamming shut behind us, though no hand touched them. My chest heaved, my ears ringing with the phantom of the hymn. And then I heard it again. Not from the church this time, not from the tomb, from within me. A hum, soft, low, vibrating under my ribs like the echo of a song trying to be born. My lips tingled, my tongue trembled, as though the hymn wanted to use my body the way it had used the choir. I pressed my hands over my mouth, but I could still feel it rising. The tomb had found a new choir, and it was me. Episode 7, The Candle That Burned My Shadow. I refused to step inside the church again. Not after the choir's eyes rolled toward me in that silent, unholy hymn. Yet faith is a cruel tether. Even in fear, I felt bound to the place, drawn back like a sinner who cannot stop confessing. That night, Father Samuel came to me. His hands shook as he lit a candle and set it on my table. Its wax was white, its flame small, yet his voice quivered as if he were handing me a relic rather than a candle. Keep this burning, he said. Do not let it die. If the shadow strays, you will know. I didn't understand until he left me alone. At first, the candle was ordinary, its light soft against the cracked walls of my room. I watched it, waiting for some sign, some miracle. Hours passed, midnight came, and then it happened. My shadow moved, not slightly, not like a trick of the flame. It bent, stretched, detached itself from me. I froze as it slipped along the wall. No longer following my body, but reaching toward the window where rain had begun to fall. The candle flared higher, burning hotter, brighter. The wax dripped thick and red as if it had turned to blood. My shadow writhed against the wall, fighting the light, its shape thinning into something less human, more skeletal, its fingers long and clawed. I tried to snuff the flame, but the fire refused. The harder I blew, the taller it grew, and with each pulse, my shadow screamed, not aloud but inside my head. "David, let us out!" The sound made me clutch my skull. My own silhouette begged for release, writhing like a soul in torment. Its mouth opened, and for the first time, I saw teeth. My teeth, rows of them, gnashing silently against the wall. The candle leaned, bending toward me, though no wind stirred. Wax spilled across the table in patterns that looked like scripture, crooked letters, half-formed words. I recognized them, verses, but twisted, words that should have been wholly rewritten into blasphemy. And then the flame stretched. It bent into the shape of a hand and pressed against my chest. Heat seared through my shirt, branding my skin, pinning me to the chair. I screamed, but the sound never left my throat. My shadow detached fully, slamming against the floor. For a moment I saw myself standing opposite me, only darker, hollow-eyed, made entirely of absence. It leaned close, and though it had no breath, I felt the cold whisper across my ear. "You are the candle. You are the wax. You are what burns." The light exploded, filling the room with blinding fire. When I opened my eyes, the candle was gone. Only black ash remained, smeared into the words of my name on the table. And my shadow, it no longer followed me. It walked where it pleased. Episode 8, The Saint Who Refused My Prayer. I thought perhaps the church still held a fragment of safety. Not in the choir, not in the confessional, not in the altar that cracked open, but in the statues. The saints, carved in stone, standing silently as reminders of the holy. Surely they would not betray me. So I went back. The chapel was cold, emptier than I remembered, its pews abandoned, its candles snuffed. Only the saints remained. Saint Michael with his sword, Saint Peter with his keys, and in the corner the Virgin carved in marble, her face forever bowed in mercy. I knelt before her, pressing the cracked rosary between my palms. "Mother," I whispered, voice breaking, "help me, deliver me from what calls my name." For a moment the silence felt soothing. My head bowed, my lips moved faster, spilling out every prayer I knew, every plea I had memorized since childhood. I begged until my knees ached against the stone floor. And then something changed. The air thickened, my breath turned heavy, and slowly, carefully, the Virgin lifted her face. Her marble eyes turned upward, not to heaven, not to me, but to the rafters above. She looked anywhere but at me. "Please," I whispered, desperation flooding my chest. "Look at me, hear me." Her head shifted further, turning away, as though my words were poison she could not bear. My rosary snapped again in my hands. The beads spilled across the floor like bones rattling in the silence. I reached for her robe, fingertips brushing cold stone, and recoiled. The marble was wet. I pulled my hand back, and it gleamed red. Blood seeped from the folds of her statue, dripping in slow streams down to the base. It smelled of iron and incense, of something too sacred and too foul at once. My body shook. I forced my eyes back to her face, and what I saw hollowed me out completely. The Virgin's lips parted, but no prayer came, no blessing, only a whisper I knew too well. "David!" I stumbled back, crashing against the pews. The saints around me seemed to shift in the shadows, each one turning fractionally away, each stone gaze avoiding me. Even Saint Michael lowered his sword as though refusing to fight in my defense. I screamed at them, at heaven, at anyone who would listen. "Why will none of you help me?" The statues did not answer, but the blood did. It pooled at my knees, warm and thick, drawing lines across the stone floor until the pattern revealed itself. My name, always my name. I fled the chapel, my breath ragged, my chest burning with a truth I could no longer deny. The saints had not ignored me out of indifference. They had turned away in fear. Fear not of me, but of the tomb that still spoke my name. Episode 9, The Cross That Broke by Itself. I could no longer pray. Not after the Virgin turned her face away from me, her marble lips betraying heaven with the whisper of my name. Yet the human heart clings to hope even when it has rotted. And so I tried again. That night, I lit a candle before the great wooden cross in the church. It had hung there for centuries, heavy and unshaken, Christ's arms outstretched in eternal suffering. I thought, if anything still stood against the darkness, it was this. The storm outside pressed against the walls, howling like a beast circling its prey. The flame flickered. My breath trembled. I fell to my knees and forced the prayer out. Our Father, who art in heaven. But the words stumbled. They bent. They cracked inside my throat, as though the air itself resisted them. Hallowed be thy name. At name, the candle surged high, spilling wax down the wood. My shadow writhed again on the wall, stretching upward toward the cross. The whisper returned, layered and vile, speaking in unison with my own broken prayer. David, hallowed be your name. I froze. The air turned bitter, metallic. My rosary snapped a third time. The beads clattered like teeth across the floor. And then it happened. The cross groaned. At first I thought it was the storm, but no, this was deeper, like bones splintering under pressure. The wooden beams cracked. Christ's figure trembled. A sound like splitting marrow echoed through the church until the great cross bent in the center. Then it broke, not by lightning, not by wind, by itself. The top half slammed down, striking the altar. Dust rained from the rafters. The figure of Christ shattered, his wooden arm rolling into the aisle, his face splintering into unrecognizable fragments. I staggered back, horror pressing down like a hand on my chest. The whisper filled the wreckage. No cross can hold you. No God can claim you. You belong to the grave. I fell to the floor, clutching the shards of wood like weapons, though I knew they were useless. My lips moved without will, repeating the prayer but in words I did not recognize. Not Latin, not holy, a tongue that tasted like ash in my mouth. Father Samuel burst through the door then, his eyes wide, his breath ragged. He froze when he saw the ruin, the broken beams, the altar drowned in dust. For a moment, despair hollowed his face. And then he whispered to himself as though I wasn't meant to hear. It has begun again. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but my voice had turned to stone. I could only watch as he fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor, not in prayer, but in defeat. I staggered out into the storm, the whisper still clawing my ears. And behind me, in the shattered church, I swear I heard wood creaking once more, as though the broken cross had learned to breathe. Episode 10. The Blood on the Altar. The church smelled different after the cross broke. Not of incense, not of dust, but of something raw, something living. Every time I stepped near the sanctuary, the air thickened, metallic, as though the stones themselves bled. Father Samuel barred the doors, but even he knew wood and locks could not keep out what had already entered. Still, I returned, foolish, desperate, compelled, because in my chest, where prayers once lived, the whisper grew louder, feeding like a parasite. It was dusk when I crept inside. The church was dim, lit only by the faint red glow from the last rays of sun staining the stained glass. The crucifix lay in pieces still, abandoned, Christ's face broken, his arm missing. The altar stood bare. And then, drop by drop, it began. A sound, soft, steady, wet. Blood. It seeped from the ceiling beams, thick and dark, dripping in perfect rhythm onto the altar cloth. At first, I thought it was storm water stained by rust. But when I approached, the truth swallowed me whole. The blood formed words. Not random stains, not chaos. Words. David H. Marino. My name. Always my name. Written across the altar in blood that had no source but the stones above. I staggered back, horror trembling through my veins. My lips formed a prayer. But the moment I whispered, "Deliver us from evil," the altar shook violently, as though rejecting the plea. The blood surged, spilling over the sides, running like rivers down the marble steps. The church filled with the scent. Iron, death, sacrifice. My shoes slipped on it, forcing me to clutch a pew for balance. And then a sound rose beneath the drip. Voices. Not one, not two, a multitude, chanting, low and fevered. They spoke my name in rhythm with the falling drops, like a litany, like a mass. David, David, David. The candles burst to life on their own, flames wild and unnatural, bending inward toward the altar. The cloth caught fire, but the blood did not burn. It boiled, hissing, spitting steam into the church that smelled like rot and incense mingled. My knees buckled. I pressed my forehead to the blood-soaked floor, choking on the heat and the chant. I begged, truly begged for God to hear me. And then something shifted. The blood on the altar stopped spelling my name. Slowly, the letters bent, twisted, reshaped themselves until I saw new words. Come down. The ground beneath me rumbled, faint but certain, like a door unlocking far below. I remembered the crack that had opened beneath the altar weeks ago. The passage that breathed rot into the sanctuary. It was calling again. I stumbled to my feet, blood dripping from my hands where I had touched the altar. My name pulsed inside the chant like a drum beat that would not end. I ran from the church, but even as I burst into the cold night, the smell of iron clung to me, staining my skin. And I knew the altar no longer demanded sacrifice. It demanded me. Episode 11. The dream of my funeral. Sleep had abandoned me for weeks, but exhaustion is a predator. Eventually, it hunts you down. And when it caught me, I didn't find rest. I found the grave. The dream began with bells, not the broken church bell that tolled 13 times, but a slow, mournful toll, the kind that marks death. Each strike echoed inside my skull until it became unbearable. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a coffin. Not buried, not yet, but displayed beneath the vaulted ceiling of the church. Candles lined the aisle, their flames bending toward me as if drawn to the scent of my body. The villagers filled the pews, silent, their faces pale, their eyes glassy. And at the front, by the altar that still reeked of blood, stood Father Samuel. He raised his hands, but not in blessing. His voice was heavy, trembling. We commit to the earth, David H. Moreno, my name, spoken as a eulogy. I tried to move, to scream, but my limbs were stiff, locked in death's parody. My chest did not rise, my mouth would not open. Yet I could feel everything. The cold satin beneath me, the rosary wound tight around my fingers, the suffocating press of the coffin lid above. The choir began to sing, or rather, they tried. Their mouths opened, but no voices came. Instead, the whisper rose to fill their silence. My name. Over and over, layered in tones both tender and monstrous. David, David, David. Father Samuel looked down at me then, his face carved with sorrow. His lips moved silently before he bent close, so close his breath chilled my ear. You should not have answered it, he whispered. The tomb has already claimed you. The villagers stood as one, their heads turned toward me in perfect unison, their eyes wide, their lips stretching into smiles too broad, too sharp. They stepped into the aisle, each carrying a candle dripping wax like blood. They surrounded my coffin, leaning over, their wax dripping onto my skin, branding me in patterns of scripture twisted beyond recognition. The flames did not burn them, but they scorched me. I forced my chest to rise, forced breath into my lungs until a gasp tore free. The dream shattered. I woke screaming, drenched in sweat, the echo of the bells still tolling in my ears. My room smelled of wax and smoke. My hands shook as I reached for the rosary, only to find it already wound tight around my fingers, just as it had been in the dream. And the wax? It was real. Drops of red hardened across my chest, as if the candles of my funeral had followed me back into the waking world. I pressed my hands over my heart, trembling, certain of one thing. The dream had not been a warning. It had been a rehearsal. Episode 12, The Tomb That Spoke My Name. It was midnight when I heard it clearly. Not a whisper, not a chant, but a voice. A voice so loud it shook the panes of my window, so clear it drowned the sound of my own heartbeat. David H. Moreno. My full name, not muttered, not hidden, spoken like a proclamation. The walls of my room shivered. The candle I had kept beside me sputtered out, leaving me in darkness thick enough to suffocate. And still, the voice came, not from outside, not from within, but from beneath, from the earth, from the tomb. I should have prayed. I should have begged. Instead, I rose and walked as though my body had been borrowed, commanded by a force older than my will. Out the door, down the stone path slick with dew, through the gates of the cemetery that no longer resisted me. The tomb was open, waiting. Its marble lid lay shattered on the ground, pieces glistening like broken teeth in the moonlight. The cavity yawned before me, blacker than shadow, deeper than death, and from it came the voice again. David, come. The ground pulsed, a heartbeat that was not mine, shaking the weeds and tilting the crosses. I stepped closer. My breath came in jagged fragments, my rosary beads rattling in my hand like bones desperate to escape. Then the voice changed. No longer distant, no longer deep, it spoke in my voice. David? Why do you run from yourself? I froze. My mouth opened, but the words that came out were not mine. They were its. My throat shaped them. My tongue bent to them. My lips confessed them. You were written before birth. You are not alive. You are remembered. And memory belongs to the grave. The air cracked. Lightning split the sky without thunder. The tomb glowed faintly, letters etching themselves across the stone walls inside. I strained to read them and horror flooded me. Verses, scriptures, prayers, every one of them rewritten to bear my name. Deliver us from David. Hallowed be David's name. In the beginning David was. The ground gave way. I stumbled forward, barely catching myself on the rim of the tomb. And then the voice roared. Not whispered, not sung, but roared like a congregation of 1,000 mouths. Enter. The earth beneath me split wider, a chasm swallowing the graves around it. Crosses toppled. Statues fell face first into the soil. And from the depths of the tomb, hands clawed upward, not of flesh, not of bone, but of shadow, gripping the rim, reaching for me. Father Samuel's voice pierced the storm then, ragged and broken. He appeared at the gate, clutching a crucifix like a sword, screaming words of banishment I could not understand. The tomb shrieked, the shadows recoiling for a moment. But the voice only laughed, my laugh. You cannot banish what was born to die here. The ground convulsed. I fell to my knees at the edge, staring into the abyss. And in the darkness below, something stared back. Not a figure, not a demon. Myself. Eyes open, lips moving, speaking my name. David! Episode 13. The Pact, written in ashes. I didn't remember leaving the cemetery. I only remember waking on the cold floor of my room, the taste of soil still in my mouth. My hands were black with dirt, my nails broken as though I had clawed at the earth all night. And on the table before me lay a book. It hadn't been there when I collapsed. Its cover was scorched, the leather blackened and curled at the edges, smelling of fire that had never gone out. When I touched it, ash flaked off, staining my fingertips. I opened it. The pages were blank at first. Then, as the candlelight flickered, words bled through the paper, written not in ink, but in gray ash that shifted like smoke. The letters twisted themselves into sentences, prayers defiled. This is the covenant of David H. Moreno, written in ash, sealed in silence. My heart lurched. I never wrote this, but the pages turned on their own, faster, snapping like wings. Each one bore my name, repeated, signed, sealed. And at the bottom of every page was a mark, my handwriting, my signature. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. No, no. This isn't mine, the whisper answered, coiling from the book itself. You already agreed. Before you were born, you agreed. The candle flared. Ash spilled from the book, pouring onto the floor, arranging itself into circles. Symbols I half recognized from sermons about forbidden rites. The air grew hot, choking, the smell of burnt scripture thickening around me. I grabbed the book and tried to hurl it into the fire. But the moment it touched the flame, the fire died. Smoke rose, curling into words against the wall. We do not burn, we remain. The ash circled my feet. My knees buckled as the voice grew louder, now layered with others, like 1,000 dead throats speaking through the same wound. David, this is the pact. You will return to the tomb. You will finish what began, and in exchange. The words halted, like a pause in liturgy, then softer, almost tender. You will never be forgotten. My vision blurred. I thought of the saints who turned their faces away, of the cross that broke, of the Virgin who whispered my name. Everything holy had abandoned me, and here in the ash I was offered permanence. I slammed the book shut. Instantly the room went dark. Not ordinary dark, obliteration. I could not see my hands, my breath, even the faintest outline of my body. Only the book, glowing faintly, pulsed like a dying ember in my lap. And then I heard scratching. From the inside of my skin, the ash was no longer on the table. It was beneath my flesh, crawling, etching. I screamed, tearing at my arms, watching as words surfaced on my skin in glowing gray letters. David H. Moreno, sealed. I collapsed, shaking, the book burning hot against my chest. The pact was written. And worse, it was alive. Episode 14, The Last Mass. The pact was sealed into my skin, glowing faintly like cinders that refused to die. Every prayer I tried to whisper turned to ash on my tongue. My chest burned as though the book itself had been buried inside me. And yet, I still clung to one desperate hope, that perhaps a final mass could sever me from the tomb's grip. Father Samuel agreed, though I saw terror carved into the wrinkles of his face. "It will be the last," he said, his voice trembling. "After this, nothing can be done." The church stood hollow and broken, the great cross still in splinters, the altar still stained with blood that no hand dared clean. But that night, the pews were filled again. The villagers came, silent, pale, each carrying a candle that dripped wax like blood. Their eyes never blinked. Their lips never moved, yet they were there, as if summoned. The Mass began. Father Samuel's voice trembled as he recited the liturgy. His Latin faltered, his hands shook, but he continued, raising the chalice high as though it could still shine with grace. I knelt in the front pew, my chest burning hotter with every word, the pact inside me thrumming like a second heart. Then the choir stood. They opened their mouths, but once again, no sound came. Instead, the whisper filled the silence, wrapping around the liturgy, drowning Samuel's words with its own hymn. "David, David, David." The villagers lifted their candles in unison. The flames bent toward me, stretching, twisting, until the entire nave glowed with fire pointing to my body. Father Samuel slammed the chalice onto the altar, his voice breaking. "Leave him, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." The blood in the chalice boiled. It overflowed, spilling across the altar like a river. The whisper roared, rising to a chorus so loud the stained glass rattled in its frames. "This is not his Mass. This is ours." The floor split. The altar cracked down the center, the tomb's passage gaping wide again, breathing rot and incense. Shadows climbed upward, crawling over the pews, wrapping around the villagers' feet. They did not move. They did not resist. They only held their candles steady. I staggered to my feet, clutching my chest as the words burned brighter on my skin. My knees buckled as the whisper poured into me, forcing my lips to move against my will. I spoke the words of the liturgy, but twisted, reversed, poisoned. "Deliver us not from evil, but into it." Father Samuel fell to his knees, sobbing, "God, forgive me. I cannot save him." The villagers rose as one. They turned their faces toward me, eyes black, smiles hollow. Their voices finally returned, but not their own. The tomb spoke through them, every throat chanting as one. "Enter, fulfill, descend." The flames from their candles leaned closer, bending into shapes of hands, clawing toward me. My body shook, the pact inside me blazing like fire in my veins. And I realized this wasn't a mass of salvation. It was my funeral.
Episode 15 Epilogue: The Grave That Became Me. The night of the last Mass never truly ended. I remember fire bending like hands, villagers chanting in voices not their own, Father Samuel weeping as though God had already turned his face away. And I remember falling into the tomb. The earth swallowed me whole, not like dirt collapsing, but like a throat swallowing food, deliberate, inevitable. I expected suffocation, the weight of soil crushing my ribs. Instead, there was air, cold, thick, heavy as incense. When I opened my eyes, I was not underground. I was inside a chamber carved from stone, its walls etched with verses. At first I thought they were scripture, but as I read, I saw only one word repeated across every line, every crack, every surface. David. It was my cathedral, and I was its only congregation. The whisper no longer came from around me. It came from me. My chest ached with it. My breath fogged the air with it. When I tried to pray, the words that left my mouth were not holy. They were echoes of the tomb itself, rising from the depths of my bones. I walked deeper. The chamber widened until I saw it, a coffin. Ancient, black, its lid already ajar. I expected bones, dust, but when I peered inside, I saw a face. My face, pale, still, eyes closed as though in peace. I staggered back, but the coffin's lid creaked open wider, and the body's lips moved. "David, we were always the same." I fell to my knees, clawing at my skin, desperate to wake, to escape, to prove this was still a nightmare. But the pact burned through me, branding me deeper, sealing me tighter. My arms shook, and I realized the ash written on my skin now matched the carvings on the wall. I wasn't reading my name. I was reading myself. The body in the coffin opened its eyes. They were mine, but emptier, deeper, as though they reflected a sky with no stars. Its hands reached upward, shadow-thin, pressing against my chest. And in that moment, I understood I hadn't been haunted by the tomb. I was the tomb. The whisper hadn't been calling me, it had been reminding me. Father Samuel's voice echoed faintly, distant as thunder. I heard him above, shouting prayers, begging God for mercy. But the walls shook with laughter, my laughter, drowning him out. The coffin pulled me down. The chamber folded around me like a wound closing. I felt my breath leave for the last time. But I did not die. Instead, I multiplied. My name spread across the walls, the ceiling, the floor, until every stone pulsed with it. David H. Moreno. The tomb no longer spoke my name. It was my name. And now, as I speak these words to you, you may believe you are listening to a man. But listen closer. Hear the echo. Feel the weight in your chest. That is not me. That is the tomb learning your name. And one night, when the bell tolls 13 times, when the candles bend toward you, when the saints turn their faces away, you will hear it whisper, not mine, yours.